Which ones underneath sand, while a halo beams in the sleeping sky, and the city lights lure with a beckoning hand, shall leave the nest to die? Blinding, the street lights coax, for one to follow who no longer crawls. As eggshells are left behind for new hope, the rest trudge towards their calls. Seek waves and tides of home, but be weary along the path of lies, of floating trash or hungry sharks that roam, or flying seagull cries. There is a voice within that will speak to the heart, guiding one's way. Ignoring the voice, a trouble begins, wandering until death day. One left his flippers swim, migrating deep below through the water, unceasingly even when all seems grim, to escape the slaughter. The journey ends later, as the turtle finds home in mist of sea, and the moon beams down, crater to crater, as he swim amongst the free. He is found, the currents he has chosen, yet my heart is learning from his lesson, giving me assurance to continue yearning. For the voice that screams all of my longings and all of my needs, and reasons to follow my path of dreams, so that I may be freed. So in this poem, the baby turtles need to get home to the ocean, and they do that by following the moon. The moon represents our authentic path, which I showed by personifying the moon into someone comforting and someone familiar. However, only one turtle survives at the end. The other turtles die from hungry sharks, trash, hungry birds. Similarly, many of us conform and we aren't our true selves. Again, the moon is a symbol of authenticity, so when the turtle follows his path and goes back to the ocean, the moon smiles and shines down on the turtle. When I made the poem, I learned two things from my experience. The first thing was that I realized that I was really reliant on technology. I wrote my poem on Google Docs, I used RhymeZone to come up with the rhymes for the ABAB rhyme scheme in the poem. I used the internet to do research on green turtles. And even though all these resources helped me write my poem, I wondered if I was missing out on anything. I didn't have the experience of coming up with the rhymes. Was I being creative, or was I just using someone else's version of creativity when I used rhymezone.com? I didn't have the experience of writing down every single word on paper, and I didn't have the experience of going to the library and checking out a book to read about turtles, or better yet, going out and studying turtles myself. The second thing I learned was that I overcomplicate things. I took a lot of time writing my poem. It took me 1 hour to write 26 words. And this is because I'm a perfectionist. By being unrealistic, I made the project a lot harder than it had to be. The problem wasn't the project, the problem was me. I expected every single word that I wrote out to be perfect on the first try. Instead, I should have just written out my poem, no matter how bad it was, and then edited from there.
The first song that I chose was Online by Brad Paisley. One line that is repeated throughout the song is, "I'm so much cooler online. Yeah, I'm cooler online." This line demonstrates how the internet can be used to create a mask, a false identity that allows one to appear more appealing than they really are. They are using the internet to fulfill a fantasy, and they will ultimately become trapped in it, unable to live their life as it actually is. The second song I chose was Digital Witness by St. Vincent. One lyric that I found in particular was the final line, which is, people become generic and conform to society when they submit to technology, becoming lifeless. They lose their humanity and who they are as people, and do not know how to regain the self that they have lost to technology. I struggled to find music at first, as the only music I really listen to is like folk metal, which is about trees and stuff rather than technology, so I had to resort to Google for finding other songs based around technology, and after perusing the various results and top 10 pages that came up, I finally found a huge listing of technology-based songs, which I picked at whim to see what the lyrics were. I made a critical error when reading the prompt. I didn't realize that I was only supposed to choose one tenant even though one was clearly bolded, so when I was analyzing my songs I had two tenets in mind, simplicity for one and conformity for the other. I was going to try to be resourceful and twist the conformity song to represent the opposite of simplicity, but I knew deep inside that the song represented conformity more than anything else. I was trying to force the song to mean something that it actually didn't, and I wasn't being true to myself. I had no choice but to find another song for conformity. I learned that it was okay to make sacrifices and start fresh.
I found a connection between a quote from Emerson's work Economy and Sinclair's novel The Jungle. Emerson says, "Actually, the laboring man has not leisure for a true identity day to day. He cannot afford to sustain the manliness relations to men. His labor would be depreciated in the market. He has no time to be anything but a machine." Sinclair talks about the labor of man through Jurgis. He says, "The peculiar bitterness of all this was that Jurgis saw so plainly the meaninglessness of it. In the beginning he had been fresh and strong, and he had gotten a job the first day. But now he was second-hand, a damaged article, so to speak, and they did not want him. They had got the best of him. They had worn him out with their speeding up and their carelessness, and now they had thrown him away." What they're saying is that in order for a man to keep up with the industrial society, he must devote himself to work. Through this, the power of the individual is hindered, for man has become a machine, conforming to a daily routine. The day man fails to fulfill the demands of his work, he is let go and becomes meaningless to society. After I found 6 quotes from our unit packet, the next thing I did was hop on the computer to search for quotes relative to our theme, after checking Snapchat, of course. Within minutes, I was able to dig up the quote said by Thomas Jefferson back in 1825. Without the use of the World Wide Web, that would have simply been impossible. Through the internet, I also found a tall tale bringing me back to my childhood, a story about John Henry titled The Steel-Driven Man. The interpretation of the story was far beyond what I had imagined as a 7-year-old and even a 16-year-old. But in no time, I learned that John Henry was a poor victim of the evil industrial world. Thanks, Schmoop.com. A key part of this project, or really any group project, is communication. As subjects of the 21st century, the message in a bottle or note tied to a pigeon wouldn't be practical, so we turned to the Remind app. This app enabled me to communicate with the other 3 members of my group, and they received these messages in an instant. After I said what I had to say, I pressed the home screen button, and on the home screen lied Instagram and Spotify pleading for my attention. Overall, technology surrounds us and it's unavoidable. We rely on it to communicate, travel, create, and get things done in this complex world.
For our poster, we decided to make a computer. The computer has many ways that it could relate to the 6 tenets. Every computer has a motherboard. It takes information from one place to another. Like the oversoul, it is a part of everything that happens on the computer. When a computer senses that something is spelled wrong, its intuition is to correct the spelling error. Our computer has a picture of autocorrect being used to represent the tenet of intuition. Wikipedia is a good website until it becomes corrupted. When you give people the power to change the website, you face the problem of getting wrong information put onto it. We use this for essential goodness because, like nature, Wikipedia can be useful until people change it. For power of the individual, we use a computer mouse. We saw the mouse allows people to control the computer. For non-conformity, we use the Twitter homepage. When a person uses social media like Twitter, they may feel anonymous, so they don't see the need to conform to people. For simplicity, we are turning off the computer. By doing this, we are showing that sometimes technology can complicate our lives more than it should. So what I learned during the process is that I try to overcomplicate it by trying to make the websites look perfect and try to make them all look similar. And I couldn't find a way to do that, so then I just kind of realized that it didn't really matter if it looked perfect because as long as we got the meaning of the websites through, then it wouldn't matter. And then I also learned that I should probably get an X-Acto knife because in the process of cutting up the computer, I had to throw away many pieces because it was really crooked and it really looked bad. And during the process of making the computer, I had to paint it, which took actually a very long time because I had to wait for the paint to dry and I had to paint it again. It was kind of hard figuring out how to make the mouse because I couldn't figure out how to make one out of paper or something, and I didn't have the material to make it out of clay. So I just decided to grab my computer's mouse and use that. And then also for the keyboard, I had a bit of a hard time with trying to make the dimensions correct and fit like the size of an actual keyboard. But then at the end, I decided to stretch it out a bit, and even though it didn't really look like an actual keyboard, it was good enough to the dimensions of an actual keyboard that it was okay to use.